being covered and how people are reacting to it. This, of course, is your last show of the week because I got a brand new show for you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. And today, like seemingly every day of 2025 so far, we have a lot we need to talk about today, so let's just continue with this. Have you ever looked at an ad and you were like, what were they thinking? Well, in today's episode of Advertising Got Wrong, we have Pakistan International Airlines. And that is because they're currently in hot water with their government after they decided to announce that their airline is resuming flights to Paris, which is something that you would think to yourself, well, how the hell are they gonna land in hot water? That's nothing. Well, here is the ad they put out into the world to make the announcement. A passenger jet that could be seen as barreling towards the Eiffel Tower with the caption, "Paris, we're coming today," with many people immediately saying this feels uncomfortably close to imagery from the 9/11 attacks. With the post just blowing up, right? People calling for it to be taken down, others saying that the airline needs a new marketing team entirely. Some asking or joking, is this a threat? But this also, as some out there were saying, any publicity is good publicity. Or with some arguing that the airline has gotten a lot of views with this post and everyone's now aware that they have flights to Paris. Though among the fans for this ad was not the Pakistani finance minister who called the ad stupid and confirmed that the prime minister had ordered an investigation into how exactly this ad got greenlit. Now with all this, we haven't gotten a statement or any sort of response from the airline itself regarding the situation, but when we look into it, what we actually do know is that this is the latest problem they've had to deal with as the government's been trying desperately to privatize the airline. But back in November, that whole movement stalled because the only bidder offered less than 12% of the asking price of $300 million. And that's without mentioning the controversy they found themselves in back in 2017 when ground crew members sacrificed a goat on the tarmac for good luck. And then, there's also the questions about safety standards, with the whole reason this announcement is coming is because the EU's aviation safety agency lifted their ban on the airline, with them in fact still banned from flying to the US or Britain. But with this news, I gotta ask, what do you think, what in your memory, what is etched in your memory as the worst ad you have ever seen? Because there are definitely some contenders out there for the crown. But then to switch to really, really big social media news, both the Biden administration and Donald Trump are now reportedly considering stopping the TikTok ban, which I would say to the Biden administration, you're the ones who wanted this. And you, for some reason, waited till there was 30 seconds till the final buzzer? Did it take y'all till now to try to figure out a plan because you were so busy trying to find your fucking clown shoes? I apologize. The opinion section is supposed to be after the story. So let's walk through this. The ban is supposed to take effect on Sunday, but on Monday, Donald Trump will be the president. And sources told the Washington Post that he's considering an executive order that would suspend enforcement of the ban for 2 to 3 months in an effort to negotiate a sale of the platform. Though with that, I'll say it's pretty unclear if an executive order like this would actually work. And understand I say all of this as the Supreme Court has not yet issued its ruling regarding the ban, though it does look like it's on track to uphold the ban reportedly. And regarding Trump and this potential executive order, you had the Washington Post explaining the strategy of using an executive order has fueled doubts among some legal observers who argue the president's word can't entirely overcome a law that Congress approved with overwhelming bipartisan support. But people close to Trump still seem adamant that they'll try something, with Mike Waltz, Trump's incoming national security advisor, telling Fox News yesterday, TikTok itself is a fantastic platform. The algorithm is amazing. We're going to find a way to preserve it but protect people's data. And that's the deal that will be in front of us. And it is kind of a funny plot twist that Trump, of all people, is in position to potentially save the app. Right? Because even though in recent months he has been pro TikTok, you might remember a few seasons ago, he was pushing for a ban during his first term. But like I mentioned at the beginning of this story, he's not the only one considering this. There are also reports that the Biden administration is trying to find a way to step in. And that's again, even though Biden himself signed the ban just last year, with an administration official telling NBC News here, Americans shouldn't expect to see TikTok suddenly banned on Sunday, and saying that officials are exploring options. And again, this feels like clownish last second behavior. The guy literally gave his farewell address last night. But also with this, I will say, you have places like NBC reporting that even if the Biden administration does come up with a last minute plan, they're still essentially punting the problem to Trump. Or with also some reports saying that Trump could opt to just not enforce the ban point blank. Though, as we've talked about in the past with the companies that could be penalized for not complying, they probably want more than a wink, wink, thumbs up that they're not going to get in trouble. So it's expected that as long as there is a ban on the books, they'd probably pull it from the app stores. Now also, notably here, earlier this week, we saw Senator Ed Markey saying that he'd be introducing a bill that would extend the deadline to ban TikTok by another 270 days. So, that is something to look out for. But in the meantime, you have people looking for alternatives. And like we talked about earlier this week, there's been this great migration to a Chinese app known as RedNote. And that migration has only gotten bigger, with reports saying that RedNote has gotten over 700,000 new users in just 2 days. But also, just today, you had CBS News doing a report noting that it's not free from ban concerns either, with a US official telling them that it could face an ultimatum to divest or get the boot, and adding, this appears to be the kind of app that the statute would apply to and could face the same restrictions as TikTok if it's not divested. With also one cybersecurity expert saying, RedNote was never meant for outside outside of the China market, saying all of the data sharing and all the servers to which the data is being shared is in China. It means that they are exempt from all these data protections and outside of the view of the American government, noting its terms and conditions are in Mandarin, leaving non-Chinese speaking users unclear about what data is collected and how it's used. So a big key thing I will say here is that the TikTok users that have moved over are making it very clear they do not give a flying fuck about giving their data to China, with some even saying they'll give it to Xi Jinping personally. But for now, who knows what the hell's gonna happen? By the next time you see my face, it might be fucking Mr. Beast talk for all I know. And if you can't tell, just the handling and the backtracking and just the sheer stupidity that's been on display with this whole story, it makes me very much feel like there aren't adults in the room. And maybe there are never adults in the room. And then we'll get back to the news in just a moment, but for many of us, the New Year's means making changes, and health seems to be the top of the list for a lot of people, but let's also not forget our four-legged family members and the importance of their health. Because some real talk, as our dogs get older, they deal with the same stuff we do: slower metabolism, less energy, the works. What I love about today's sponsor, Sundays, is their ingredients. Think human-grade ingredients. We're talking real meat, organs, and superfoods, zero artificial junk. And what's really cool is it's air dried like beef jerky, so you can store it easily without taking up fridge space, which I definitely know my wife appreciates. And a fun fact is this was created by a vet who knew that kibble just wasn't cutting it, but didn't have time for home cooking, because who actually does these days? I started my dogs on it early and they still love it. It's not too late to start a healthy food plan for your dog no matter what age. Plus, the home delivery is just clutch for my life. And so if you're ready to upgrade your dog's diet, just head to sundaysfordogs.com/Phil to get 50% off your first order of Sundays. That's 50% off your first order of dog food with human-grade ingredients. Remember, sundaysfordogs.com/Phil. Your dog will be happy you did. But then, next up, we gotta talk about an unlikely duo, the Supreme Court and porn. Right, in that, because during oral arguments in a case yesterday, the High Court justices signaled that they are likely to uphold a Texas law requiring age verification for porn sites. A move that many say would roll back not only First Amendment protections for porn, but potentially even open the door to broad restrictions on online speech. Because specifically, the law in question requires people to verify their identity and prove that they are over 18 in order to access any website where more than a third of the content is deemed what they call sexual material harmful to minors. With that law then also mandating the sites post a warning that porn is potentially biologically addictive and proven to harm brain development, which is also a claim that's been widely disputed by experts. Now, also notably here, Texas is just one of the nearly 20 states that have imposed these kinds of age gating laws. And as we've talked about before on the show a handful of times, those laws have then resulted in Pornhub suspending service in almost all those states, which has essentially made one of the world's most popular and well-known adult sites unavailable across a wide chunk of the South. But in Texas, Pornhub and other adult industry groups sued, claiming that the law violated the First Amendment and the identity verification requirements raise very serious security and privacy concerns, with them arguing that users' identifying information could be hacked, sold, or otherwise misused, thus opening them up to identity theft or possible extortion. And this, as the adult content groups noted that the law has a major loophole that would prevent it from being effective, saying it doesn't restrict access to porn on social media or other sites where less than a third of the content is sexual material. And saying at the same time, the law leaves this, we'll call it a gaping hole, because it also restricts access to other sites that are mostly devoted to content that isn't sexual. And initially, what we saw is that a federal court in Texas agreed with those arguments, striking the law down. But the state then appealed, and the conservative Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the decision, allowing the law to go into effect. Though there, it did strike down the warning label requirements. And in their decision, the appeals court justices cited a 1968 Supreme Court ruling that upheld a law making it a crime to sell pornographic magazines to minors. But then, of course, the adult industry groups appealed to the Supreme Court. And in oral arguments yesterday, lawyers for the plaintiffs argued that the appeals court had erred in its decision, noting that there was a much more recent, much more applicable Supreme Court ruling that could be applied. Because back in 2004, the High Court struck down a similar federal law that aimed to protect children from online porn, ruling then that states can restrict minors' access to sexual content, but any laws that might limit adults' rights to free speech need to undergo the most rigorous legal standard called strict scrutiny. Which I will say, to not get too deep into legal jargon, all you really need to know is that the strict scrutiny standard, it basically says that the government needs to have a very, very good reason for passing a law that may infringe on a constitutional right, like, for example, the protection of public health and safety. And even then, the law also must be designed to advance that public interest in the least restrictive way possible. And if that sounds like an almost impossibly high bar, it's because it is. Most laws do not pass the strict scrutiny test. And so in the 2004 Supreme Court ruling, the justices applied that standard and said that the federal law violated the First Amendment, arguing that there was a less restrictive way to limit minors' access to porn. With them writing at the time, instead of requiring every porn website to verify the age of every user, the government could have just promoted content blocking or filtering software. But that was a major departure from the 1968 ruling, which used the most lax legal standard, rational basis review, which just says that a law needs to have a legitimate purpose. So, like, almost all laws. Or, as the Washington Post explained, in other words, Texas is claiming that the situation today more closely resembles that of 1968, when it was assumed that human shopkeepers could distinguish kids from grown-ups at a glance. And so in their arguments before the Supreme Court yesterday, lawyers for Pornhub argued that the 2004 decision and the strict scrutiny legal standard it relied on should be applied in this case as well, with them saying, like in that case, there is a